Hi, welcome to another episode of Start the Week with Wisdom. I'm your host, Bridget Burns with the University Innovation Alliance.
And I'm Doug Lederman, editor and co-founder of Inside Higher Ed.
Each week, Doug and I team up to have a conversation with a sitting college president, chancellor, or leader in the field in the hopes that we can distill a sense of their perspective and their wisdom to share with you on a Monday as optimistically as possible. That's why we call it Start the Week with Wisdom. So that is definitely something we're going to be delivering today.
Yep. And we're brought to you each week, this week as every week, by Mainstay, the student engagement and retention platform that you may remember as AdmitHub, but pretty soon we'll be able to stop saying that.
I feel like we can now because I don't think anybody remembers who they were.
Yeah. What? AdmitHub?
Yeah.
Anyway, Mainstay really distinguishes itself by having peer-reviewed research to back it up. Some ed tech companies and platforms do that, but Mainstay is really distinctive in that way. And there's a lot of research that shows the ways it worked with Georgia State, particularly to reduce summer melt, to increase retention, and you can check out that research and more about Mainstay at mainstay.com.
And this show is also later broadcast on the Innovating Together podcast, which the Innovating Together podcast is sponsored by the Carnegie Corporation of New York, and we are very grateful for their generous support. And now, I feel like you want to hear like drum roll, right? Like,
yeah, totally. So today's guest is John King, who is the Chancellor of the State University of New York System. He's had a bunch of different roles to give him a really interesting perspective about higher ed before taking over at SUNY. He was president of Education Trust, which is a organization that pays really close attention and advocates on behalf of students. And before that, he had this little role as Secretary of Education for the United States. So welcome, John. Good to see you.
Good to see you guys.
We're so excited to have you here, and we've wanted to have this conversation for a while because you're someone who every time I see you, like, it's always such a delight to catch up and see what you're up to, which is just, it's like it keeps building, right? Like, you think that Secretary of Education, that would be the high watermark, but like, you just keep on doing cool stuff, and the cool stuff that you're doing now at SUNY. Very excited to hear about, but more than anything, I want to understand what it's like you as a leader. I have so many questions, like, because you had these incredibly important roles. You've led thousands of people. I don't know if it's millions, right? Like, I guess Secretary of Education. I'm so curious. I want to start off by like, where did you get your first model of leadership that you try and emulate? Is there anyone in particular that stood out for you? And like, tell us about your leadership kind of approach.
Yeah. Well, first, so happy to get to spend this time with you guys. I think about actually when I was a kid, the impact that my uncle had on me. My uncle Hal was a Tuskegee Airman. He grew up in a very segregated New York City, early 20th century, decided, despite all the obvious evidence of America's shortcomings in segregated early 20th century, decided to serve, decided to become one of the first Black pilots in the U.S. Air Force. When he came back from World War II, he was trained as an accountant, but couldn't get a job as an accountant because of racism. And so he decided to become a firefighter and literally risk his life every day for people in a society where he didn't have equal treatment. And then he went back into the military and was career Air Force, retired as a lieutenant colonel, and then spent the rest of his life doing other public service roles, leading a hospital, working for the Delaware River Port Authority. Just had this incredible life of public service and was always so clear about his patriotism and belief in America and belief that through service we could make the country better, even when he was confronted with so many obvious examples of where America was falling short of its promise. And I'll always remember he put out his flag every day, all through his life. He chose to be buried at Arlington National Cemetery. And so I've always tried to think about his integrity about leadership, his belief that whatever the current struggles are, we can make it better. His belief in the promise of America. that's always been a source of inspiration for me.
Oh, he sounds amazing. And it's also, I could see where that comes from and how that shows up for you, especially in difficult times, which, I mean, there's like no shortage of these days, right? Being able to.
Absolutely.
So what you took from that is around the consistency and like having a, no matter what, having this bigger vision and hope and optimism for sure and what's to come.
Exactly. Yeah. Incredible faith he had in our potential to be better.
And do you feel like as a leader, when you are leading teams of people, that's really the cornerstone role, is making sure that they remember that and that you kind of like remind them of the bigger idea, the bigger vision all the time? Because I do think that is what leadership is about, right? It's like the big idea. Yes.
And I think, in our sector, there are lots of challenges, but we have to stay focused on what is our core mission in terms of serving our students and helping them graduate with meaningful knowledge and skills that will allow them to thrive in life, our mission of preparing the next generation of citizens who will lead our democracy, and of course, our mission of contributing to research and answering society's big questions and big challenges. But even through all the obstacles, we have to stay focused on that mission and have faith that we can make it better, that we can each, through our work, contribute to better completion rates, closing equity gaps, expanding opportunity. And one of the things I love about SUNY is that's what we do. For our entire 75 years, that's been our function for New York, delivering a path to opportunity.
Mm-hmm. That's great.
John, one of the interesting things to me is it's only in this role, or this role differs from the last couple roles you've had, because in this role, it's you're part of the sector, and in the previous ones, you had roles where you were supportive, but also you were looking at it from outside, both at the department and at Ed Trust, sometimes fairly critically. I mean, that's part of the role. And so I'm curious, I mean, you could, I think, through it seems like the through line there is belief in the potential of this enterprise to make a difference in people's lives, and you're just sort of coming at it that mission in different ways. But I'm just curious, like, is it different? How different is it leading from within the industry and within an institution compared to those other roles?
I think one of the things that Ed Trust has always had as kind of a signature characteristic is tremendous urgency. And being on the inside, you are sort of so regularly confronted with the things that make it hard to achieve those urgent goals. For example, at Trust, we would talk often about the need to diversify faculty in the higher ed sector. We have a huge disparity between the diversity of our students and our faculty. And we would say the institutions need to deliver on that goal meaningfully and quickly. And then on the inside, what you see is not only the pipeline challenges, which we talk a lot about, but also the ways that the institutions are structured that make it very difficult to make rapid progress on that goal. If you think about how long a tenured faculty member stays, you're changing the entry pool, but you've got many years before that entry pool is fully reflected in the total faculty. And so one of the disciplines I try to have is not let myself get so focused on the obstacles that I lose that sense of urgency that I had at Ed Trust, that we've got to find ways around those obstacles. We've got to grow our faculty. We've got to create new roles. We've got to find other ways, because our students deserve to have a faculty that reflects the diversity of the country.
That's interesting.
Mm-hmm. So I'm just wanting to stay at this level about your leadership. So we've learned a bit about your uncle and about kind of where your your philosophy comes from and how you've adapted it into different environments. But I'm just curious, like, this will probably be hard for you to answer, but as a leader, is there one thing that you're most proud of? Because I feel like you probably got a lot to choose from.
Can I say two?
Sure.
I started my career in K-12. I started my career as a teacher and principal, high school teacher and a middle school principal. And I still am in touch with some of my students. And one of my students, when I was a middle school principal, she is now a leader in the Massachusetts State Legislature, China Tyler. And I'm just so proud of her. Another one of my students became the principal of the school later. So on one level, I think as an educator, you're always most proud of those students who, you can see that maybe you help them a little along their way. From a policy perspective, I will say one issue I've gotten to work on across different seats is the expansion of higher education in prison. And it started with, in the Obama administration, we, as part of My Brother's Keeper, really wanted to tackle the problem that Pell Grant access had been banned for folks who were incarcerated in the '94 crime bill. We couldn't get Congress to move on it. And so we created a pilot program using our flexibility under the Higher Education Act called Second Chance Pell, which both of you are familiar with, to allow 65 colleges and universities to use Pell Grants for students who are incarcerated. And then when I left after the administration ended and I went to Ed Trust, I helped participate in a coalition of civil rights groups and criminal justice reform groups and education equity groups who used the Second Chance Pell pilot to make the case to Congress, governors, legislatures about the need to expand higher ed access in prison and to reverse that Pell ban. And eventually the law was changed as a result of that advocacy and really the advocacy of the directly impacted folks telling their story. The law was changed, and now at SUNY, we're the largest provider of higher education in prison, and we are working with partners like Ascendium to grow our higher education in prison portfolio, to expand the programs, to add in some facilities where there's an associate's degree program, add a bachelor's degree program. And it's incredibly inspiring because you see the transformative power of education. If anyone listening hasn't been to a higher ed in prison commencement, they should go because they are so powerful because of how transformed folks' lives are, how transformed they feel personally, how proud their families are. Just incredible work. And I'm really proud to have been able to be a part of it in these different seats.
I'm very interested in being able to go to one of those. I can only imagine. I've seen some stuff. Of course, social media has been helpful at further underscoring just like exactly how impactful that is. But yeah, that's perfect. You hit two altitudes that on the things to be proud of. That's really good.
One of the things that Bridget likes to ask about, and I think is a good one, is it's not quite the flip side of what you just talked about, but what's the hardest thing you've had to do as a leader?
On the micro level, I think, when you think about building a team, it's awesome when you're adding talent and recruiting great people, and that feels amazing. But sometimes it's not the right fit. And there are people on the team who, they may be good people, but their job is not the right match for their skill set. And that moment where you have to let someone go, tell them that it's not working, those are always really painful. I think often I have put it off longer than I should have, and it would have been healthier for the organization and for the person to have moved more quickly to do that when it wasn't working. But that's just, I think as a leader, just always really painful. A more macro policy level, I think there are issues, and you both have worked on these issues in lots of ways for many years. There are issues where you just, you constantly have to find a new reserve of resolve to go back at it, because you haven't made progress as quickly as you hoped. And to not get discouraged and still show up and say, this is the right thing to be fighting for, and I'm going to keep fighting. And that perseverance is a critical part of leadership. And you have to have things in your life maybe that help you fill up that bucket of resolve each day.
Yeah. No, what I find interesting is the universality of what you just said. Like, we've had, there's been more than 100 episodes. The hardest thing is always interpersonal. Like, when you care about a person, it's about employment, it's about managing people. And like, when it's so interesting, because we talk to people who are like having to shut things down, having to even through COVID, big, hard decisions, but it is always that human one-to-one, and the feeling of somehow that you as a leader have failed them in some way, that is just universally the hardest part. There is just nothing that makes that easier. I find that striking. And then the other is when you're talking about these big, having to get your resolve, I would add to it that when you can tell that the wrong thing's going to happen for politics or for small stakes that don't matter because of like a win, or because you're maybe are part of the wrong, maybe your organization or otherwise, like you don't have the power or something. But that's really disheartening, because then it feels like, oh man, I'm fighting for the right thing, but like it doesn't matter.
Yep.
Yeah.
Really hard, but you have to have faith. I mean, this is why I always go back to my uncle, because you have to have faith that, in the long run, justice will advance, right? That famous Dr. King line that President Obama would quote all the time about the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice.
Yeah.
And you just have to keep that faith.
Yeah. No, that's true. I wanted to know about what has been the most surprising thing about your career. I have a feeling that there's quite a bit.
The thing that when I was teaching at University of Maryland, College Park, that I would always say to my undergraduates about it is that it looks like I planned it all out, but I actually did not. That, they were oftentimes trying to decide, what first job to do after college. And they'd be so stressed about it and agonizing, and almost see life as a choose your own adventure book. Like, if I choose page 72, that's going to determine every other thing that I'm going to do the rest of my life. And is it the right thing? And they would put so much weight on themselves. And I would say, like, it doesn't really work like that. You find the right thing that you're passionate about, you work really hard at it, you try and do it well, and then life happens around you and opportunities come, and you want to be ready to step into them, but you can't plan it all out. And I think I always try to convince young people to be a little less, put a little less pressure on themselves, that each decision is going to shape every other decision, that actually, you get lots of opportunities to hopefully over your career to do different things. And lots of stuff happens by a good amount of luck and timing.
Yeah.
It'd be good if we could, I think that's an important, thinking about the industry we all work in and around. I think I've always tried to make some of those same arguments about the college choice process, because especially now, of course, you would argue now, you have to argue that everybody should go to SUNY, but anyway, but it's especially in areas like where I live, where that decision is so freighted, and people think it's this little group of selections or doom, and it's like no. So I think that's sort of
right.
that idea that there is very little that either fates you to greatness or to doom, and very few little things, very few. Because some of them seem very big at that moment, but life can take you lots of places.
Absolutely.
And this is a case where I feel like the sector as a whole has to step up, because we're hearing all of this negative feedback from the public about, whether college is worth it. And a lot of that is informed by that we allow this high stakes conversation to continue without the way that we support students evolving, right? Like, we ask students to choose a major with no information about the market for that major, or understanding how students have like what other paths they take. Like, we, show up, make this, it's so difficult to pick a college. And then we just are like, great, now you're going to sign up you're just going to pick a major and you're stuck here. And then at the end, even though we know the anxiety that happens that whole last year when they're terrified about the next steps, and we really do allow this reinforced message of this binary thinking and like high stakes, and you make the wrong mistake and you're done. And it's like, I think that we could actually do a much better job that would probably lead to better outcomes if we help students with a more nuanced understanding of how to set yourself up to success. And it's really about this resilience piece, about like, stuff's going to go wrong. You're going to actually make some mistakes. And let's just talk about how we're going to breathe through that, and how we're going to like get up, dust ourselves off. Like, I just think this is a place where it's not one institution to solve this, but like as a sector, this is clearly connected to the stuff that we're hearing from the public.
Oh, 100%. And I think, this is part of the secret sauce of a program like ASAP or ACE, is having that relationship with an advisor who you trust, who can be there in that moment and say, I know this grade was bad, but all is not lost. Here's the tutoring center. Here's the writing center. Have you gone to office hours? I know it's scary, but you should go and sit down and talk with the professor, even though they gave you this bad grade. Unfortunately, some students just don't have that relationship. But if we can create that relationship and then marry it with really good systems like Georgia State has put in place and Tim Rennick helps others to adopt, if we could marry that with the wraparound supports that ASAP and ACE bring around transportation and emergency grants, we can make it so that we help our students be resilient and help them push through when those obstacles come.
Yeah.
And especially when we can fold in, and we're moving in that direction, but much better understanding of the post-college opportunities, possibilities. Your administration had a little bit to do with that, with this college scorecard and the beginnings of all that. But I think the advising piece is we got to figure out how to pay advisors better so that more institutions have more good advisors, because I continue to think that may be one of the biggest, not missed opportunities, but sort of ways we're underperforming as a sector. And it's not generally the fault of the advisors themselves.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. And we need to make the financial calculus that investing a little more in advising may seem like an expense, but actually it's an investment that will have a huge return because students will stay and finish. And so it's smart financially to put resources there.
Yeah. It's the most important job at the institution. I think it always has been. I'm like not pandering, but it's just so funny because like I can say that. And yet when I think about the connection between my personal budget and my values, like if you found one of my bank statements on the street and I told you that I was super into health food, and yet all you see are these McDonald's purchases, right? Like, I'm lying to myself. And so for us, like there's a disconnect between, I think what is important and what really matters and what gets resourced. And it is a place of hypocrisy that is just like, we need to be confronting it on a regular basis.
Very well said.
Well, so I would love to know, because this has just been a really great conversation. You're just so thoughtful, and we've always known that. But it's nice to be able to elevate you as a leader and make sure that other folks get to benefit from what we've all experienced in the back of the room or in small conversations with you. I want to understand, before we end, I want to know about the best advice that you've been given that you find is a touchstone you go back to in your career most often. Who gave it to you?
It's funny. It's a very practical teaching tip that my cooperating teacher gave me during student teaching. And I planned out this very elaborate lesson, and it went very badly. And my cooperating teacher said to me, he looked at my lesson plan and he said, you know, what you did was you thought about all the things you were going to do. And you didn't think about all the things the students would be doing during the class. You wrote the lesson plan from your perspective, not from their perspective. And that was very helpful and really changed how I thought about lesson planning. And it's something that has stuck with me because so often we start as leaders from the perspective of, like, here's the policy I'm going to announce. Here's the speech I'm going to give. Here's the direction I'm going to provide. And it's actually hugely valuable to say, like, what is this going to be like for the person I'm talking to? What's their experience going to be? What's the change in daily practice for the registrar or the advisor or the professor or the enrollment office, and how will they experience this? And then what does that mean about what supports they'll need, how I should think about this policy? And that was very, very useful advice. It wasn't necessarily leadership advice. I mean, it was, in a sense, leadership advice, but it was a very practical teaching tip that's made a big difference for me.
It sounds, if I were to broaden or generalize it, it sounds like sort of a form of empathy and figuring out the other, putting yourself in the other's shoes in sort of a broader way. And, you know, it sounds like that teacher was ahead of the curve in terms of trying to be student-centered, you know, a term that probably barely existed back then.
Yes, I don't think that was a term then,
and is now rhetorically widely used. I'm not sure we always do the actual walk, but anyway, that's really interesting.
No. Yes, it reminded me of an exercise. Now, as you say that, it reminds me of an exercise we did at Trust once in a convening with campus presidents. I think we had provosts and student affairs VPs, and we asked them to figure out on their campus website how students could transfer credit if they were coming as a community college student to their four-year institution. And people were totally flummoxed navigating their campus website. People were sort of hiding their phone and calling back to campus to try to figure out how to navigate their website to understand just what would I have to do to get my credits. And that's another example of, like, it's fine to say we're going to make transfer seamless, but that's only meaningful if the student experiences it that way.
Yeah, I mean, first step of design is empathy, is like the touchstone of design thinking. And like, that has been the secret sauce of all of our work, is that we just figure out who the actual user to serve is, right? Like, so advisors, totally an underserved group. Mid-level administrators being treated as a means to an end, totally underserved group. You create things of value for people like that, they will go to battle for you. Like, we too often are thinking about the wrong audience when we're creating things, and like just being obsessed with who you're trying to serve, and they'll tell you what they need. They'll show you what they need. I completely agree. It's good stuff. Doug?
Sure. Well, I guess, the last question is usually about the advice that you give typically. What should the advice you most often give when, I'm sure the many people that view you as a mentor or seek your advice, what do you tell them?
There are two things. One simple, which is to do a lot of listening, to ask questions and then really listen to the answers, whether it's from peers, from the trustee level, from students. you get so much from asking good questions and just listening to the answers and trying to have a learner orientation. The second thing is I always recommend a book by Ron Heifetz, Leadership Without Easy Answers, which I just think is a brilliant book that helps you think about the role of leadership as not providing technical solutions to people, like seeing problems as, someone comes with an illness, the doctor provides them a prescription, the illness goes away, and thinking of leadership in those terms, but instead thinking about leadership as leading the community through adaptive change. And he frames it as helping communities bridge the gap between their values and their reality. And I think that's just such a powerful way of thinking about the leader. And it requires a lot of discipline, because sometimes people really want the leader to have the technical solution and just tell us the answer, when in fact what the leader should be doing is really orchestrating the community solving what is a very complex problem.
That's really good. And you said Leadership Without Easy Answers is the name?
Yes. Yeah. Leadership Without Easy Answers by Ron Heifetz.
Great. We love that. I was going to ask you for your book recommendation. I love that you got it in there. This is perfect. We consistently hear folks talk about how they go out and this is like their library, these books that are recommended by folks on Weekly Wisdom. Well, Chancellor King, it has been just such a privilege to have you on the show. We're delighted to be able to, again, showcase your leadership. You've been a valued ally in the field in so many different places, and you've done incredible things worth being proud of. So, and your leadership is worth celebrating. So thanks for being one of the good guys.
Thanks for the opportunity to hang out. This was fun.
Well, anytime. We just sit here on the internet. Doug and I are in here every week. Like, sometimes people don't come.
Waiting. It's like, come on.
Yeah, it's like our coffee hour. Anyway, thank you so much. And for our viewers at home, we look forward to seeing you next week. Take care.